Hey everybody, Dr. Dave Marquis here, and I wanted to talk to you today about diabetes. And we have basically 4 different types of diabetes now. Type 1, which is where the individual has actually lost much of the capacity to release insulin from their pancreas. So their beta islet cells have been impacted in some way. I'll come back and talk about that a little bit more. And then you've got type 2, which is where your insulin receptors really aren't working that well, and you may have burned them out for a variety of reasons that we can touch on. And so you actually need more insulin. It's kind of like playing whack-a-mole to drive the glucose into the cell. And then you've got type 3, which is also known as Alzheimer's, because the brain is supposed to be able to regulate its own insulin. And then you've got type 1.5, which is kind of a blending between 1 and 2, where the pancreas isn't doing so hot and the insulin receptors aren't doing so hot. And this myriad of mismanagement of blood sugars creates this chronic state of inflammation in the body, which can have a lot of downstream negative impact. Today I wanted to focus on the type 1 because I'm seeing so much more of that in the environment, in my practice, in youth. And that really concerns me. Anytime I see an uptick in a disease state in an age group, I'm like, well, what's going on here? I don't necessarily have the answer, but some things that it's been pinned on is probable viral exposure, and then there's a suspicion because of the timing around it of other metabolic burdens that might be associated with childhood vaccines at that age. Now, I'm not pointing a finger at anything right there, but something in youth is impacting kids where it's starting to cause an increase in type 1 diabetes where those beta islet cells are no longer functional. I've been in practice long enough that I've been able to work with a number of people in the type 1 category where I've been able to help them get their blood sugar back in check by using other dietary interventions. And this has kind of always baffled me why we don't take this approach kind of universally, because the whole dance around diabetes is managing glucose, right? Our body is fueled by 3 things predominantly: glucose and oxygen, or ketones and oxygen. And if you've burned out the pathway on one group, glucose and oxygen, and it's not able to work very well, why don't you hit the switch on your dual fuel generator and start burning ketones? And so for my diabetic patients, they hear that word ketones and they automatically translate that to ketoacidosis, which they've had the fear of God put into them to avoid, and rightfully so, because it's not a healthy state to be in. But if keto is done appropriately and applied appropriately, it can help diabetics actually turn the tables on what their body is doing. Then they're not managing a disease, they're actually starting to promote wellness and give the body the tools to start to potentially repair itself. And the thought all along has been, hey, you can't fix diabetes. Well, I would respectfully disagree, because I've worked with so many type 2s over the years and enough type 1s that I've seen both of those types of diabetes get arrested and many of them get reversed, that I know it is possible. I'm not saying that everyone can, but I am saying that it's worth investigating so that you can start freeing yourself from the volume of drugs that inevitably you're going to have to embrace over the course of your life. So just another avenue that I think anybody who's dealing with glucose mismanagement or anything under the heading of diabetes, you seriously need to look at applying proper principles of ketosis, because it can help you free up yourself from the heavy burden of drugs. Now, what are some of the things that you can do to actually help the body retrain itself after you've eliminated the burden? The burden being excess carbohydrates. There's a whole group of botanicals that there's a lot of literature on. Things like Garcinia cambogia, banaba root, bitter melon in the Gymnema family. So there's a number of herbs that have actually been published over a long period of time, like from the 50s on to now, showing that you can regenerate and restore function to your beta islet cells and to your insulin receptors. But this research often gets ignored because we tend to be a population that will not step away from carbohydrate consumption in volume. But if somebody's willing to make some dietary changes and fuel themselves appropriately with proper ketones so that they actually stay in a proper state of ketosis, not ketoacidosis, and without going into a detailed conversation, please know that those are 2 dramatically different states. It's not hard to get into a proper state of ketosis, and if you're there and you're using these botanicals, then your insulin receptors and your beta islet cells are no longer getting beat up on. and now you can nurture them. And over the course of 12, 18, 24 months, you can actually start to repair yourself and free yourself from the burden of so many pharmaceuticals. That's the message that I wanted to share with you today, that for all diabetics, there is hope if you're willing to investigate and put the time and energy into work. And it is work because you have to be aware of your body and you have to be measuring things, but any diabetic is accustomed to measuring. Now you're just measuring different things. While you're looking at your blood glucose, you're also looking at your ketones. And knowing that chemistry allows you to start to drive your bus away from the pharmaceutical building that you've been living in for this whole time. I hope that that message motivates you to reach out to a functional medicine practitioner that is comfortable walking you through this process. It is enjoyable to see people's lights go on and get their life back. I love doing that, and I know that it's possible because I've seen it happen so many times. So I hope that's uplifting and motivating to you, and I encourage you to reach out today so that you can make those changes and free your life. Be well.